We're very thrilled to be joined in the studio with none other than music legend John Cale, recently awarded an OBE for his services in music. He's been an influential, pioneering and groundbreaking person during the last 4 decades, and of course co-founder of the Velvet Underground, solo artist, and part of many collaborations with the likes of Patti Smith, Nick Drake, John Cage, Brian Eno, and it goes on. And he's here as part of the Melbourne International Arts Festival 2010, involved in 3 magical shows: Noises in My Head, 7 Songs to Leave Behind, When Past and Future Collide, where John Cale Band and Orchestra Victoria will perform at Paris 1919 for one night only. Thanks for coming into the studio, John.
Hi there.
It's a pleasure to have you. And early this year, you were here as part of the Sydney Festival, and you had sort of a slideshow where you had a beautiful picture of you in a turtleneck and a bow tie, which I was very impressed by. But you said that you were someone who spent his time trying to fuck up sounds. Now, does that describe you accurately?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I manipulate and tear them apart and put them back together in different ways. Yeah, a lot of the songs on Homo Sapiens were done that way. I had a DJ friend who was the leading light in Trash Palace, Dimitri, and he would send me MP3s. You know, I'd tell him, just send me some things that are rational, and he would send me those things. And eventually, what would happen is you impose some kind of structure on things, but it was really a good way to get to new songs. And I mean, I don't do that anymore. I start off with grooves, but screwing around with sounds, you never know where you end up.
Well, it's a sort of a long way away from the viola as a young boy. How did you go from the viola to the sounds that you're so famous for?
Well, the viola was really something I got in when I was a young kid, and what came from that was a lot of experience playing with orchestras, and when I took the viola to New York, it was distorted even more. I mean, I started working with Lamont, where I filed the bridge down, and I put guitar strings on it and held this drone that was very nasty, very, very. It was in just intonation, so the whole place shook when you played three guitar strings at once and held the bow. You know, you need a cello bow or whatever. So,
is that a tone cluster? The 3 chords?
A tone cluster, I think, is really where you just put your hand down on the keyboard anywhere. But we worked very hard at getting this weird sort of intonation thing going, and we worked at it for a year and a half, and I was really taken by surprise by that track you just played, because I never heard it before. It's Andalusia, actually, but I must have been rehearsing the band. I must have been rehearsing with Lowell and Wilton and teaching them the songs. So things get released without you behind it. Well, that's an old story. Yeah, everybody does that.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
I'm not going to worry about that, but it's. But Lowell, the tone was there, and you know. I didn't know that they were going to be the guys that were going to be playing with me. I was just teaching them.
You've been involved in a lot of spoken word, Hector Suzu's album Sahara Blue and The Long Voyage, and on Jack Kerouac's Kicks Joy Darkness you did The Moon, a tribute to Jack Kerouac. What is it about the spoken word that draws you as well as music? It's a different.
It's really soundtrack time. One of the things that I remember as a kid was listening to a film program on BBC Two on a Sunday afternoon, and what they would do, they would review films, but they would play the soundtracks of those films, and you got to hear, you know, how the dialogue delivered, and it was very dramatic and very special. And so Kerouac is the same idea, and you know, Walter Jeffers Had Reached His Limit is the same idea, and. So there's a whole. You're in a different world when you're listening to our voice, because you're trying to picture this whole life experience in his voice, and it's riveting.
There's a whole industry out there on the internet of people trying to trace your musical influences. But what about what about the influence of writers on you? I mean, you know, you famously recorded Dylan Thomas poems. Are there other writers that you come back to for inspiration?
For inspiration, there's one book that just every time I got stuck with the lyric, I'd pick up Michael Ondaatje, The English Patient, and just start reading a paragraph, and before very long, something would trickle out. It was really, I loved that book, and it was kept me good company for a long time.
And you were at the 2009 Venus Biennale with poets and filmmakers and so forth, and that was sort of in honour of the Welsh language, and obviously you're from Wales. What is it about the Welsh language that lives within you? You know.
Yeah, we put the piece up in Hobart last January, I think. And the piece is what they asked me to do was, would I do something for the Welsh Arts Council, to do something for their entry into the Biennale, and I never done it. But then I thought, well, there's audiovisual. I know what that is. I love the idea of film and sound, and then let's try and work out what it is we can put in there. All the elements in the piece, Dark Days, is autobiographical. The only answer I really had to the question was, yes, I will make it personal, because if you make it personal, you pull people in, and some of it was was climbing a mountain, which is sort of had something to do with what I do generally nowadays for staying in shape, and then there were some nostalgic pieces about the village that I was in, and I thought I'd go back to my old house and listen to the house, and we did. We went upstairs and we did but the most pernicious aspect of the piece is really what is essentially a divided society. I mean, there's a Welsh and an English part of it, and when I was a kid, it wasn't a really good experience to have your grandmother hate your father because he didn't speak any Welsh. And, ban the use of English in the house. So I couldn't talk to my father until I was about 7, and I learned English at school. So that all played into it. And so the Welsh language, although I know it's a beautiful language and everything else, I have very mixed feelings about it still.
And Paris 1919 brings us to today, and when past and future collide with the band and the orchestra. You've said Paris 1919 is a travelogue, colourful vignettes of your love of Europe, and of course the Treaty of Versailles and the peace, the Paris Peace Conference come into it. What is it about the album? You said it's not as a concept album as such. What would you describe it as?
Well, it's really what happens to a Welshman when he goes to... He's lived in New York for years, and he's always wanted to live in New York, and then decides, okay, I'm going to move to California. And he's been there once before with the Velvets and Sunshine, and now he's got a job, or maybe he can work something out. But he's really in the desert, and he ends up writing songs about all the things that he misses about Europe. I mean, when I left California and moved to London in 1973, and when I got there, the obtuse thing was that I was sitting in a basement apartment in London listening to the Beach Boys all day. So when I was in California, I was just thinking, well, what am I nostalgic about? And really everything that I thought about in Europe was really in that album.
The Mojo Album of the Year Awards last year, you presented an award, and you said that the best British export was sense of humour.
Yeah.
What's your humour like, and what kind of things do you find funny?
It depends on who I'm talking to. I mean, I really believe that, though. I mean, it was a very underestimated sort of export. And before I came out, I was listening to the BBC, and there was a Hindu doctor who became a stand-up comic. There was a Muslim lady who was a comic, and they were all talking about, the question is it okay to make jokes about Muslims and Islam, and it was really interesting. I mean, I just thought, well, what would happen if this thing was aired in the States? I mean, things are a little twisted over there in the States, I think, at the moment.
Funny to hear you talking about humour, though, because when people say John Cale, I often think very dark, very brooding.
That is a humorous side to it. I mean, it's like being too sick. I mean, that was one thing about Lou, was that his sense of humour was was really based in dark, and if you don't get that and are ready for it, then it takes you a while to figure it out. But he was very funny from with the dark side of things.
See, again, it's not what comes to mind when you think of Lou Reed is not
No.
necessarily.
I understand.
And of course, you're also doing 7 Songs to Leave Behind, which is a great project. And I guess you've covered some amazing songs in your life. How do you step into someone else's songs, someone else's shoes, and how do you decide then to make it your own? What kind of process do you go through?
If the lyrics really have something that people are not familiar with, if you like Heartbreak Hotel, until you read the 4 verses that were there and realized that every verse was written by a different person, and they'd all have a different view of things. That made it worthwhile. I mean, in fact, I put it in a minor key or whatever. Was just a small bit of it. If the lyric wasn't there, then that wouldn't have worked as well. Doing a gothic version of Heartbreak, and with Hallelujah, I remember the first time I heard Hallelujah at the Beacon Theatre when Leonard did it there, and it really grabbed me. And then somebody, Les Rock-Thibault, is the French magazine, they decided to make a record of all Leonard's songs, and I'm Your Fan. And I remember that song, and I got the lyrics, and I did that. But it's really, they're very eloquently written. And I'm going to, on some songs, I'm going to be doing an Isley Brothers song that really has some touching lyrics called Harvest for the World. And the Leonard Cohen song is, of course, going to be Hallelujah. But the others in there, I'm going to do Letter from Abroad from Homo Sapiens, because Nick Franklin is going to be in my band, and he produced that record. And so I'm looking forward to being able to use all the orchestral. I'm doing Magritte as well with the real instruments, and so it'll be. I mean, I think the idea is so good.
So it's an interesting concept, isn't it? That they're asking you to sing a song that turned you on to being a musician.
Yeah. Then
a song you'd like to share with others.
Yeah.
And the song that above all that they wish that they had written. So what's the song that above all that you wish you'd written?
Well, one above all that I'd wish I'd written is Harvest.
The new Young song?
Yeah, Harvest is... the story is about a lot more than Harvest for the World. The story is about today, what's happening today. And he talks about dress me up for battle, when all I want is peace. Some really good singers in there.
Because, of course, it's sort of the theme of spirituality and mortality, and we were just talking about death before. What is the legacy you want to leave? That's a hard one. What do you want to leave behind on this earth, and people to say about you?
An inquiring mind. Really, somebody who's ready to search.
You can't beat that.
Yeah.
We've been speaking to John Cale. He'll be here as part of the Melbourne International Arts Festival. Go to the website for more information. These will be just either they're sellouts or will be sellouts. Noises in My Head, 7 Songs to Leave Behind, and When Past and Future Collide. And I'd love to play now the Moon, the track from Kix, Joy, Darkness. And you talked a little bit about the process of it, but what was your mood going into making this piece, The Moon?
Well, trying to turn a poem into a soundtrack, really, is really because, and whether my voice will carry it. And isn't that a Hal Wilner project?
Yes.
Yeah. And Hal is a way of really pairing people off expertly. And, So it was really whether I could, because my background is a million miles away from Jack Kerouac's, and really, what can you bring to the table? So I just trusted Hal and let it go.
And you've done such a beautiful job. It is so you. When I think of John Cale, I do think of this piece. Thanks so much for talking with us.
My pleasure.
We really appreciate it. You're listening to Triple R Aural Text.